Hello, everyone. I'm Mnar Adley, founder and director of MintPress News. The Israeli attacks on Iran continue. Since Friday, IDF jets and missiles targeted sites across Iran, carrying out targeted assassinations of key leaders and hitting buildings and other civilian infrastructure. In response, Iran has launched its own strikes on Israel. The Trump administration reportedly knew about these attacks all along and used their negotiations to lull Iranian leaders into a false sense of security, only for Israel to strike them. Worse still, it appears that the Trump administration is on the verge of striking Iran as well, but we don't know for sure. Despite the fact that Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard recently assessed that Iran is not developing nuclear weapons, which is Trump's excuse for the attack. And of course, we've known this all along, that Iran is not developing nuclear weapons. What does this mean for the region and the world over? To discuss this, I'm joined by Seyed Mohammed Marandi. He's a professor of English literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Professor Morandi is one of the most influential and well-known figures on Iran in the English-speaking world, someone who has already been targeted by Israeli strikes. Professor Marandi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Of course, I don't know if I'm a target. They targeted the Iranian national broadcaster, and I was in one of the buildings, and they evacuated the building, but I refused to leave because I wanted to do an interview with Piers Morgan, and after that with the Judge Napolitano, and then RT. So it was very difficult, but I was empty. I was alone in the building. Ultimately, after each interview, I'd leave the building, and then I'd get permission to come back in. But they struck the central building and murdered a number of journalists and people working at Iranian national TV, which I think many people across the world saw footage of that atrocity.
Of course, we all saw that video of the very brave anchor in Iran who, defied the airstrikes and stayed put on national television while her building was being struck. And it wouldn't surprise me, Dr. Morandi, if you were targeted. I mean, Israel has a grotesque history of targeting, over 100 journalists in Gaza, and already they've targeted Iranian state TV and other media professionals inside of Iran. And of course, you've been such an incredible voice outside of Iran to break through the fog of war and propaganda and Iranophobia, I guess you could call it, that Western media and politicians have been pushing, including that of Piers Morgan. And so I'm really sorry that you went through that. We're very happy to see that you're okay. We've been thinking about you since the beginning of this crisis, and of course, all the citizens of Iran. But you specifically, because we know you personally, you're a friend of MintPress, and we consider you an ally in this fight against U.S. imperialism. So we're very happy to see that you're okay.
Thank you very much. Of course, there are over 200 Palestinian journalists who were murdered, I think over 220, 230, and tens of Lebanese journalists, and of course, Iranian journalists now too. I don't know if I'm a target, actually, but security people asked me to put my cell phone aside. And I told them it's not possible for me because if I don't have my cell phone, I can't do interviews and I can't help. So I basically isolated myself from my family.
I can understand that that's a very difficult position that you've taken. So we were praying that your family is okay, and we understand, and that obviously shows that the courage and bravery it takes to continue to break through that kind of propaganda, and knowing that your voice is so important, and that's why we wanted to have you on for today. And I know that your internet right now is not the most stable. It seems like we're doing okay so far. Your voice, the volume of your microphone is a little bit low. So if there's any chance that that can be increased, I don't know if it's an internet issue, we'd greatly appreciate it. But while we have you, we want to know what the situation is on the ground in Iran. You're in Tehran right now. What is the atmosphere like there?
Well, actually, I'm in a building that's been evacuated, so I'm the only person in the building. And since the internet connection is slow in Iran, for security reasons, they've slowed the internet. The only way I can do this interview is to come here. The situation is calm. Many people have left the city of Tehran because the government has made it sort of like COVID, where people work from home and a lot of people are on vacation. So a lot of shops are closed. I think that'll be the case for the next few days. And people are very angry at the Israeli regime. They're outraged, and there's a lot of demands in Iran for the government to go much further. Uh, Contrary to Western wishful thinking, there's more unity in Iran now than I've seen probably since the war, when Saddam Hussein invaded the country. And the Israeli regime is, of course, killing innocent civilians. On the first night, they bombed a apartment block that's not very far from where I live, and actually somewhat close to a studio that I frequently go to, somewhat walking distance from there. They bombed a building, murdering everyone, 65 people, because they wanted one or two senior officials that were living there. And it's interesting how Western media glamorizes these atrocities and says that Mossad carried out, or the Israelis carried out this sophisticated operation. They just destroyed an apartment building with over 20 kids. And it's no secret that who lives where. I mean, people in my neighborhood know who I am. When I come and go, they know it's not some great secret, but no sane world leader would carry out an unjustified act of war against another country, an unprovoked act of aggression. But the West supports it. You've seen how Western governments have supported the strikes, and how the United States, of course, is a part of this war. And increasingly, it seems like the United States plans to directly get involved. But right now, it seems that the Iranians have the upper hand. During the first day, the Israeli regime was doing well because Iran, even though the armed forces was on alert, but it was still a surprise attack, and no one thought that they'd go for senior government officials or senior military officials, which was, of course, a mistake. But in any case, now the Iranian air defenses are working much better. The missile, Iran is firing a lot of missiles at the Israeli regime with a lot of success. And a lot of the drone attacks that were taking place, much of all this were drone attacks. They were coming from northern Iraq, from Syria. Some say from Azerbaijan, the Republic of Azerbaijan. I don't know if that's true. And some from different parts of inside Iran, people that the Israeli regime had cultivated before through WhatsApp or other means, and they probably pay them with Bitcoin and that sort of thing. But ordinary people are getting involved, and they're helping the security agencies, and a lot of people have been arrested, and a lot of these places where they store or make these drones that carry smaller bombs, these have been discovered by security agencies with the help of the public in many cases. Actually, the drone operation is very similar to what was carried out in Russia. And since these two attacks are almost simultaneous, because the planning goes back a long way, it's obvious to Iranians that the same people who are behind what happened in Russia are the same people who were behind the drone operations in Iran.
Horrific. And we've all been kind of sitting at the edge of our seats watching all of this unfold, just like we did with Gaza, right on our TV screens and our smartphones. And it's just so disturbing on so many levels what is happening. And in the middle of it all, I just want to go back to that interview that you did that may have put your life at risk in the Iranian state TV broadcast building. It was with Piers Morgan. And while Israel was dropping bombs on these apartment buildings, like you said, and killing innocent civilians and children who we saw being pulled from under the rubble in Tehran, you did an interview with Piers Morgan, which I thought, we don't want to give this guy too much attention, but I do want to play a clip here of Piers Morgan and your interview and your interaction with him, because it really goes to show just the arrogance of Western.
The reason that I actually think that Israel has a right to do what it is doing with your regime is that your regime has been the fulcrum for terrorism in the Middle East now for decades. Through Hezbollah, through the Houthis, through Hamas, it has done whatever it can do to destabilize the region, to terrorize Israel and anyone else it doesn't like. It's a draconian, oppressive, appalling regime, which is deeply unpopular with many Iranians. And every time I've seen you appear in the last few days, you've had a big smirk grin on your face, as if somehow you know better than everybody else, and that somehow we are misinterpreting your rulers and your regime, and that you're all a bunch of really nice people who have nothing but good intentions for the rest of the world, when in fact it's the complete opposite. And finally, Israel has said enough, and they're coming after your nuclear capability because your own ruler, the Ayatollah, has made it clear that he would very much like to see Israel removed from this world. And if you hear that and you're in Israel, then you're going to take action to stop that happening. So that would be my response to you.
Well, if your rant is over, I would point out that you are a dishonest person and a dishonest so-called journalist.
You can do ad hominem stuff as much as you like.
But you were too cowardly. Be quiet for a moment. Be quiet for a moment and let me speak.
You don't tell me I'm the one on my own show. If you're going to call me a coward, if you're going to call me a coward and a liar, then I won't be quiet on my own show. Especially not from someone like you who spews disinformation.
I am the one in this building that has been evacuated, and I'm only sitting here because of you. So allow me to speak.
Well, keep the ad hominem attached to yourself then. If you're going to call me a liar and a coward, I'm going to jump in and take you on. So show some respect or don't bother.
You are a coward. You are a coward. You did not come to Iran when I invited you, so you have no right to.
I wouldn't trust going to Iran. Why on earth would I trust going to Iran? As your guest,
your guest said nonsense about.
As your guest in Iran, with your contacts with the Iranian regime.
So don't.
I wouldn't trust that as far as I can throw it.
So don't comment about Iran if you don't come here.
Well, let me give you some facts about your country. Let me give you some facts and see where I'm wrong here. Women face severe restrictions when it comes to marriage, divorce, inheritance, child custody, and so on. Compulsory veiling, punishable by flogging and prison sentences. Women punished for bad dressing, defined as exposing any body parts below the neck. Women banned from certain professions. They can't be judges. They can't be they can't be in certain positions in government. A ban on independent political parties, civil society organisations, trade unions. LGBT people suffer systematic discrimination and violence. Closing shops that have so-called improperly veiled customers. Authorities censor media, jam certain television channels, continue to block or filter mobile apps, social media platforms. Executions, including those of children, torture and other ill treatment are widespread and systematic. State television can often air torture-tainted confessions, arresting and sentencing people who break fast during Ramadan. Anyone who speaks out, protests against the regime, can be subjected to the death penalty, flogging, prison terms and other severe penalties. It doesn't sound like a great place for me to visit, with all due respect, Professor Marandi. So you can tell me that I'm a coward and I'm a liar, and I can tell you that you prop up, personally, you go on the airwaves and you disingenuously prop up and grotesquely defend a terrible regime, which is now getting, as many people see, its final comeuppance for constantly threatening Israel with getting a bomb and taking it out. And that's what this is about. You know it and I know it.
So this clip that I just shared with Piers Morgan really symbolizes just the arrogance of the Western corporate media that pretends to care about human rights, that pretends to care about women in Iran, while simultaneously supporting Israel's genocide in Gaza that has obviously affected women and children, and the same thing in Iran. These bombs that they're dropping, that Israel's dropping in Iran, have affected women. They've killed women, they've killed children. So for him to sit there and list one by one all the things about why the Iranian government is bad because they oppress women, which of course is not even true, is just so hypocritical. And then he goes on to say that you're being disrespectful and you are throwing at him ad hominem attacks when the premise of his whole interview with you was to attack you personally. And so how do you respond to this?
Well, I saw him take out a piece of paper, and it was clear that he'd prepared something beforehand to rant about. And the issue, for me, is the demonization of Iran. Just like the demonization of Palestine. When they want to destroy Palestine, they demonize it, they make them look subhuman, so that when genocide is carried out, it's acceptable to the public. And then when it's time to destroy Lebanon, they do the same in Lebanon. When they bomb apartment blocks, Western journalists call it Hezbollah strongholds or Hezbollah bases. And they know they're lying because many of those journalists are in Beirut and they have people working for them who live in these areas. But anyway, so the personal insults aren't very important. It's interesting that I invited him to Iran to see for himself if women are being cruelly treated or beaten or battered or whatever it is he says. And but he declined because he does not want to open his eyes to reality. Although I personally believe even if he came, he would not change. These people don't change when they see reality. They have certain narratives that they have to abide by. That's how they keep their jobs. It's not just him. It's all mainstream media. It's all legacy media. So his objective is to demonize Iran to prepare the grounds for war, to justify the Israeli act of aggression. And ironically, while he was ranting about women, it was at that time that women in Iranian radio and television were dying and were wounded because they bombed the central building, And it wasn't, by the way, just one channel. I put up on my Twitter account another woman who was a radio presenter, and she was working as the building was being bombed. And she was just as impressive. So it's clear that Piers Morgan does not care about Iranian women or Iranian people or Iranian children, just as he never cared about Gaza. When public opinion shifted against the Israeli regime over Gaza, and he felt that it was overwhelming. Recently, he did a couple of tweets, but that's not a change of heart. It was going on for 20 months. It's because I think he felt that he couldn't do this any longer because the public had turned against him. So actually, I think he liked this unprovoked war against Iran because he could now demonize Iran and praise the Israeli regime for aggression and murdering people, and thus distract attention away from what is going on in Gaza.
Absolutely. And speaking of, I want to talk more about the United States' involvement in this war. And while it seems from the outside that, Trump and his, neocon swamp are discussing at what level they're going to be involved, I mean, all of the bombs that Israel is using are provided to Israel by the United States. And the United States has bases inside of Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and I believe Bahrain to monitor Iranian missiles also that would be heading towards Israel. And so they're providing Israel with a lot of intelligence. And so obviously none of this would be possible without the United States support and help. And then we have Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who recently assessed that Iran is not developing nuclear weapons. And Trump is basically just saying, well, we don't care what Tulsi says, completely throwing his base under the bus for an apartheid regime. And so what we thought was, obviously we know that it wasn't always America first, but it's becoming more and more obvious that that Trump himself and the Trump administration is putting Israel first. How do you respond to that?
Oh, I agree completely. I think that was the intention from the very beginning. And without the United States, the Israeli regime would never have been able to carry out an assault, not just on Iran, but it wouldn't have been able to continue this genocide in Gaza, this Holocaust in Gaza for the last 20 years, between 20 and 21 months now, let alone the war in Lebanon. They have the full support of the United States. They have the full support of Europe. Recently, you see grumblings in Europe, but that's only because they're afraid of their public. And the same is true in the United States. But there are no sanctions against the regime. There's no real pressure. The aid and the assistance continues. So the West is a full partner in the genocide, and it's a full partner in the assault on Iran. And U.S. bases in Turkey, as you pointed out, Qatar, the Emirates, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait are all being used to help Israel, the Israeli regime, offensively and defensively. And of course, Jordanian airspace is open to the West and to the Israeli regime, and so is Iraq, although the Iraqi government apparently doesn't have any say in all of this. But yes, there's a huge coalition against Iran. And it's ironic that Iran, which is the evil, it is the side that is supporting the Palestinian people. It is the side that is actively opposing the genocide, unlike everyone else. Everyone else is doing business as usual, transporting oil, trade, embassies. Nothing has changed. None of these countries have broken off ties with the regime. So it's only Iran and Yemen, of course. And so Iran is facing a very large coalition because of its support for Palestine. And what is the West supporting? They're supporting ethnic supremacism. They're supporting racism. They're supporting genocide. They're supporting every evil that this regime carries out. And obviously, the regime has absolutely no red lines. And so they're the good guys, and the Iranians are the bad guys. And of course, I should add that countries in this region, through their oil and gas wealth, they're usually anti-Iran. They're usually demonizing Iran for their own reasons. And so the regional countries, they're also part of that broader Western camp. They look to the West. They're either members of NATO or they're client regimes of the United States in some other way or form. Right now, they're terrified, but because they know that if the United States gets involved in a war with Iran, that their regimes will fall. These dictatorships, these family dictatorships that host U.S. bases, they're very vulnerable, they're very weak. Their oil and gas assets are very easy to destroy, and they will be complicit if there is conflict with the United States. So they are terrified right now. But traditionally, that's the role that they've played, and right now they host U.S. bases. So Iran is confronting this huge front, multi-layered front. But As things stand, Iran is emerging stronger than the Israeli regime, and that is why Trump is now, despite the promises that he gave to the American people, he is Israeli first, and he is moving closer towards war. And if that happens again, that will destroy the global economy because the price of oil and gas will go through the roof. There will be no more oil and gas, not just going through the Strait of Hormuz. There won't be any oil and gas in West Asia at all being exported. And that will create a global economic catastrophe worse than the Great Depression. That's something that we don't want. It is something so horrific that I don't think that we can imagine what life will be like afterwards. But that is now increasingly a strong possibility.
And you know what's so interesting, and I know that you and I have discussed this in the past, is that obviously the war in Gaza has exposed the moral depravity of the neoliberal Western order, but it's also actually united Muslims in a way, and Arabs too, in a way that that they haven't been able to in a long time because of so much propaganda when it came to the war in Syria that pushed sectarianism. And with Israel's genocide in Gaza, we're seeing people unite across all political and religious fronts on the ground with the people. And so when you talk about how a war with Iran would just devastate the entire region, we're seeing people in Palestine, in countries across the Middle East, cheering on Iran right now. And you might have not seen that maybe 10 years ago, but the people on the ground are cheering Iran on because now it's obvious to them who is actually defending Palestine, who is defending the people of Gaza. It's not the leaders in Saudi Arabia. It's not the leaders in Turkey. It's not the new Jolani government. It's not the Egyptian government under Sisi. It's not Morocco. It's not Bahrain. It's not Qatar. It's none of the Gulf states. It's Iran and Yemen and Lebanon. And what's in it for them? They've been sanctioned, they've been isolated, and yet they've stood strong to support Palestinian resistance, liberation, and the struggle that Iran represents is an anti-colonial struggle. And I think that's what has really brought people together to support the people of Iran in a way that has broken through that decades old propaganda that has pushed sectarianism that was brought on by Israel and the United States. And so we're seeing this new wave of support for anti-colonial struggle in the region. People are breaking through that propaganda bubble. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yes, I do see that happening. And a lot of that sectarianism and racism, although it has its roots in the West, the funding has come from oil and gas-rich countries in the Persian Gulf, and more recently from people around Mr. Erdogan and TRT, for example. But I think that is changing. I think many people are even seeing that what the Iranians and the resistance was saying all along in Syria, that this is not about Assad or the Syrian government. This is about a CIA plot to undermine Syria to the benefit of Israel. And many, not everyone, but many have even opened their eyes to that reality. They see Syria in a very different light. And so today, I think, yes, you're right. Many people across the region, despite attempts to keep this racism in place and sectarianism in place, and you see organizations and entities funded by governments continuing to promote this sort of thing, but the mood on the ground has changed dramatically. After Gaza, after Lebanon, after seeing what happened in Syria when the new regime came in place and how they behaved towards the Israeli regime and the Americans and so on. But most importantly, perhaps, now that Iran and the Israeli regime are trading blows, of course, we have to keep reminding people that this was initiated by the Israeli regime, and they initiated an act of aggression. But the West was gloating and saying that Iran has been defeated on Friday, and then Friday night, Iran began to strike back, and which is very impressive. You've lost all these commanders, and it's very difficult to regroup and to reorganize, and it'll take weeks, maybe months, maybe for them to feel comfortable in their new positions. And then they're at war, but yet the way in which they've responded to a regime that is completely backed by the collective West, I think is quite stunning. And yes, it has united people across the region and across the world, and in places I would have never imagined. The Islamic Republic of Iran is now very popular among non-Muslim countries, among people across Latin America. I get messages from all over the place. And there are so many wonderful people across the world who are supporting the Palestinian cause, supporting the Iranians, supporting Hezbollah, supporting Ansarullah. And in the West, you know some of these people are our mutual friends, Jews, Christians. You saw that young Hindu woman at MIT. I'm in a pretty difficult place. You see people from all walks of life, from all faiths, from all parts of the world uniting. And this is something that's made the Israeli regime, the Zionists, the neocons, increasingly desperate. And so they are mobilizing their forces to punish the Iranian people so that the Palestinian cause will once and for all come to an end.
And I want to talk a little bit about the media because, no war would be possible without the stenographers within corporate media who act as mouthpieces for the U.S. military machine and the Israeli war machine. We're being told in Western media that these Israeli attacks are surgical strikes against nuclear facilities. The front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, of course, had a title, Israel strikes Iran nuclear facilities. Even though the image they use doesn't look like a nuclear plant, it's actually an apartment building. And we're also being told that Iran was on the verge of developing and using the atomic bomb. A story from the BBC stated, was Iran months away from producing a nuclear bomb? What do you make of this framing?
Well, it's natural. It's understandable. Western media is controlled, and it never was free. And it's much worse than back in the day when Noam Chomsky wrote Manufactured Consent. It's a tool. It's a tool for empire. It's a tool for the war machine. And of course, the Israelis from the beginning were slaughtering ordinary people. And even when they strike the nuclear program, they are attempting to cause radiation leaks. That's the objective, and the West is fine with that. So, when it's non-Western people, we are all Amalek to them. We are lesser people. It's Zionism. It's the same thing. These people are in bed with the Zionists, and their worldview is the same. Their worldview may be like that because they have to be that way in order to have the jobs that they have. And so they have to also convince themselves that they're right to be able to sleep at night. But that's how it is. They're going to demonize Iran, portray Iran as vicious, and so that anything they do against Iran, any crime committed, is justified. What is more horrible than what has happened to Gaza? Gaza is unique in human history because this genocide, this Holocaust, has been carried out in front of the eyes of the world. That's never happened before. For over 20 months, we saw just this morning that 70, 80 people were massacred by tanks and drones as they were waiting for food. And it's not important for the West. They don't care. It's not important for Western journalists. They don't care. So when they're committing these crimes against Palestinians and they're totally indifferent, you shouldn't expect them to treat Iranians any better. We shouldn't be any surprise. So as Piers Morgan was attacking me, he knew that IRIB, the Iranian radio and TV, was being bombed, that journalists were being attacked. He knew that over 200 Palestinian journalists had been murdered. He knew all these things, but they don't care. The Israelis are the good guys, and we're the bad guys, and it doesn't matter what it does. So after what we've seen in Gaza, we should not expect anything less for ourselves. And that's another reason why people must stand up against the Israeli regime. Because it's not just about even Palestine. People in Jordan should recognize that ultimately they're going to go after them. People in Egypt should understand that they're going to go after them. In Lebanon, in Saudi Arabia, this is an expansionist regime that has no red lines, and the West has no red lines. And so if they think that they can close their eyes and look away, and this will go away, no, that's not going to happen. It's going to get worse, and one day what's today happening to others is going to happen to them.
Absolutely. And you talked a lot about, Iran kind of having the upper hand in this war, despite the framing by Western corporate media. What sort of defenses does Iran have to Israeli attacks? I mean, we saw recently an Israeli F-35 jet shot down over Iran. So can you talk more about that?
Yes, Iran's air defenses are performing pretty well. Intelligence officers, with the help of the people, they're arresting a lot of these people who are working for the Israeli regime and using drones. Iranian missiles are striking back. Also, I think, as I said earlier, the Iranian public is very much united now, and everyone sees the Israeli regime as the aggressor, the United States and the West as aggressors. I would also add that what happened yesterday at the Iranian radio and television was, I think, an important turning point, because the fact that the staff at the Iranian TV and radio did not leave and stood their ground and continued work was something that people across Iran saw. And many people outside Iran saw that too. And that was a key moment, I think. And so I believe that the Israeli regime has badly miscalculated. And even though they may have had some successes on the first day, although not as great as they thought, because many of the things that they bombed, they were decoys. That's what the Iranians do. They have, these decoy missiles, they have decoy jets. They have, just a couple of days ago, they were publishing 2 F-14s like right beside each other that they bombed. But when they bombed them, there was no explosion, there was no secondary explosion. And also, what would 2 F-14s be doing right beside each other? It's sort of like obvious, but the Israelis are, these are officers that publish these, or like they publish footage, and I've tweeted these. I've shown the footage. They bomb, for example, these missile missile systems, and then, well, if you bomb a missile system, when it explodes, there should be a huge secondary explosion. But there is none, because it's a decoy, or the radar systems. So a lot of what the Israeli regime is presenting as successes are not real successes. And sometimes they say, we destroyed 100 of these, but they only show footage of like 2 or 3. So, but during the first day, they had some successes. But I think the fact that it was aggression and it was unprovoked was a grave mistake, and far outweighs any limited military success that they had over the first few hours.
And I want to talk more about the decoys and the dummy targets that have been set up all over the country, and how the Israeli military has spent millions of dollars destroying bits of wood and plastic that look like jets. What do you have to say about that?
Well, any professional military has that. And I think it goes back to this Orientalism that they think that we're not as sophisticated as they are, whereas we're probably more sophisticated than the Israelis. And the Iranians have been preparing themselves. For 20 some years now, we've been expecting an American war against Iran. That's why you have so many assets underground. That's why you have all these underground missile bases, or the nuclear program is underground. It's underground for a reason, because they've been expecting war. And that makes it much more difficult for the Israeli regime. We've been preparing ourselves for a much bigger enemy, and that's the regime in Washington. Israel is nothing compared to the United States. So all these underground bases, no matter how many times Israelis bomb them, they're not going to be damaged. We saw even the United States, when they used bunker busters in Yemen, they failed to destroy those underground bases. So how are they going to deal with Iran? The Israeli regime will fail, and Iran is committed and determined to defeat it. And the United States may get involved. I think there's a good chance for that. But Iran, the price will be high for everyone, very high, unbelievably high. I think it will change the world. But Iran will make sure that the United States fails.
And I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I just have one more question for you about this foreknowledge of the Israeli attack by the United States. Donald Trump famously said, "We knew everything." That's what he said about Israel's attacks on Iran, implying that the whole negotiations between the US and Iran were just there to distract Tehran's attention. So my question is, to what extent can Iran even bother negotiating with the United States, knowing this? You were an advisor on Iran's nuclear negotiating team. So how will this work, if at all, in the future?
Well, I was a media advisor, but you're absolutely correct. Everything has changed now. Our relationship with the West, with the United States, has changed. Trump, by being deceitful and gloating about it, has basically told the world that you cannot trust the United States in any way or form. Even if they're speaking with you, they may be plotting behind your back. And I think that in future, at the negotiating table, Iran's expectations will be much higher, and Iran's demands will be much greater.
Dr. Marandi, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm happy to see that you're currently safe. We are praying for peace. We're praying for an end to this war. And of course, we'll be following you on social media to make sure that you're okay, your family's okay. And we'll be following you also for consistent updates. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. And I hope your audience, while they show their support for the people of Iran and they oppose this aggression, this aggression by the Israeli regime, we always remember that the Israelis are continuing with the genocide in Gaza.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.